ABC Solutions owner Rayanne Buccianico returns as guest host to talk about news from Intel, the threat of AI-generated text management pro tips, and more. Plus, a fascinating guest interview with Rory Sanchez on lessons learned selling his business. It's ChannelPro Weekly number 252, High Jerk Tolerance. Hello and welcome to ChannelPro Weekly, episode number 252. My name is Matt Whitlock, technology editor, online director, and your host of this fine show for the fine viewers and listeners that are like you. And who are you? You could be a lot of things. You could live in a lot of places. But the general gist is that if you work with other companies with technologies, if you're an MSP, a VAR, an IT integrator, a managed services security provider, an IT consultant, a system builder, if you do something with IT and you do it with other businesses, you are in the right place. Or if you just like the sound of my voice, you're also in the right place. Joining me this week and most weeks is the man of the hour, the guy who keeps the trains running here on time here at ChannelPro. Please welcome executive editor Rich Freeman.
Thank you, Matt. And I will officially go on the record as saying I like the sound of your voice.
I appreciate that. People always said that I had a face for radio, so it's good that I have the voice to back it up as well. Although if you're watching on YouTube, you're seeing my face too. So, well, sorry. No, I'm kidding. Anyway, with that, how was your week going?
Chugging along. I hate to go straight into business, but I think we're both preparing for ChannelPro's first event of the year. Yeah, it's busy stuff, but exciting stuff.
It is exciting. Our first virtual event is coming up January 18th. Rich, do you want to give people a quick little preview on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is actually a virtual event. It takes place on January 18th. This is our Managed Services and Cloud Online Summit, actually the first of two of those that we'll be doing over the course of the year. And we have got session. Actually, there is a session that I am moderating in this event that ties directly to a story we'll be talking about quickly here on the show, which is just about hiring, onboarding, managing techs. A lot of super interesting stuff in that conversation. We have what we're calling co-managed IT 201, sort of, folks I think kind of know the basics about co-managed IT these days. We're going to do the 201 level master class on that. We've got a session on cloud cost optimization, on cloud security. The wonderful Jennifer Bleem, who's joined us before on this podcast, will be talking about how, this is her title, How to Sell Tech Without Speaking Geek. So just all sorts of awesome stuff there. You can get more information. You can register. Plenty of room. It's virtual, folks. Go to events.channelpronetwork.com. And while we're at it and while you're there, if you're going to be anywhere near the Dallas area, right at the beginning of February 2nd, I believe it is, that's when we're doing our first in-person event of the year. And we won't dive into all those topics, but that's going to be really exciting stuff too. And you can register at the same site.
Yeah, and I will make it easy. I'll put a graphic up with a QR code. So if you're listening, you can go to channelproforum.com/2023. That will take you to a page where you can kind of register for all kinds of events this year. We're going to be in a lot of places. We've got a lot of virtual events. It's going to be exciting year coming up as well. So thanks, Rich, for telling us about that. And we hope to see everyone at one of those. Rich, we are also not alone. We've got a awesome returning guest host joining us this week. I'm really excited that she's back because she's always a lot of fun when she's on, and she's a very super smart person, which is always great to have in a guest host. She is the owner of ABC Solutions in Clearwater, Florida, which provides complete accounting, business, and tax consulting services to IT professionals in the U.S. and abroad. In addition to accounting and tax, she also specializes in offering Autotask consulting services to MSPs around the world. Please welcome the one, the only, the fabulous Rayanne Buccianico. Welcome, Rayanne.
Well, thank you, and hello. It's great to see you both, and I'm so glad to be invited back to the ChannelPro podcast. So thank you for that. And I will be at the Dallas show on February 1st and 2nd. So I will see you guys live and in person there.
Well, fantastic. We get to see you now, and we get to see you again in the flesh very, very soon. That's very exciting. And so what are you going to be doing in Dallas? You can go ahead and say it.
Oh, yeah. So I'm going to be on a panel with Colleen and two other gentlemen, and we're doing the MSP Automation Bake Off. So I am cooking up some really exciting automation tips for your audience. So, but you have to be there to hear it and see it.
Awesome.
You know,
Yeah.
it's funny, Rayanne, and the Colleen she was referring to as our managing editor, Colleen Fry. You know more than I do about how that session is going to work right now. I mean, I knew the whole bake-off concept, but I actually don't know how that gets played out. I'm really looking forward to it. I think it'll be fun.
Oh, it's going to be fun, and I'm telling you, I'm going in to win it. So I've got this whole thing laid out, and so my whole presentation is going to be all around the recipe for automating your MSP. So I learned a lot from the Survivor, the MSP M&A Survivor last year. So I'm coming in guns loaded, or flour sifter loaded. So
Yeah, the Survivor one I thought was pretty fun. Did you like that one?
I did. It was a lot of fun. And when we first started the M&A Survivor last year, I had never met Alan or Sean before. And then by the end of the year, we became super close friends, like all three of us. And so and that's Alan Edwards and Sean Walsh. So and now we've found that areas to work together in different parts of business, and it was a really great experience for, I think, all three of us.
Awesome, and hopefully for the audience too. As a lot of people who've been to our live events know that we try to inject a lot of fun into the session.
You guys, nah.
and theme them and try to make it a fun experience and not quite as dry and boring. So like last year we had Survivor, and we had like a dating game kind of thing that we did. This year I can tease a little bit that we were doing the Bake Off, which is one. We're going to be doing Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, I think, this year, because that's taking shape. We've got we're working on a concept for unsolved mysteries. We'll have to. Rich and I are still kind of toying with that one, figuring out how we're going to make that one work. But yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun.
It may or may not involve me wearing a trench coat on stage. We'll see.
If we actually go for it, I guarantee it will involve you wearing a trench coat on stage, for sure. So that will be, it's a lot of fun, folks. Definitely make a point to come out to one of our live events. It really is. You get a lot of great information, and you also have a really good time and meet a lot of great people. So make sure you do that. So Rand, you've been on before. You've guest hosted with us before, but if some of our viewers and listeners happen to miss that episode, why don't you tell us a little bit more about you and a little bit more about ABC Solutions?
So ABC Solutions is my core business, and we've been in business since 2005. And I started off as just your general, boutique accounting, tax prep services. And then over the years, I kind of, back in the, and I'm going to date myself here, back in the 90s, I did a lot of IT work. I did built VPNs, and I configured servers. I got my first Microsoft MCP in 1998. And so I really, really liked working, as in tech. And so I started to take my, my technology knowledge, my accounting and business knowledge, and I put it together. And that's what ABC stands for: Accounting, Business, and Computing Solutions. That's how I got my name. It wasn't because I wanted to be at the top of the phone book. Are there still phone books? I don't know. We might be in
I haven't had one delivered here, and it's been a long time now, but they delivered them for quite a while, even before they probably came on.
I guess. I mean, I don't even know that I've had a landline in the last 15 years. So, but everything's been virtual and digital, and we've been on voice over IP since 2011, I want to say. Anyway, so and when I started to shift my focus from being like an accounting and tax generalist to really focusing on IT, because I was fishing cables through ceilings in the morning, and I was doing tax returns in the afternoon, and this was not sustainable. So I had to pick one, and I really didn't want to give up my technology. And so what I did instead was I gave up the general accounting, and I sold that tax practice back in 2011 so that I could focus on technology. And I went through a company that we specialized in selling accounting firms. And I thought, why isn't there one of those in the IT community? So then I got together with my friend Amy Babinchek, and we started Sell My MSP so that we could help MSPs buy or sell their company without getting raked over the coals, and somebody that understood the process, somebody that could help with the negotiations and form the employment contracts and agreements, and make sure that their people are taken care of, like all of those little details that that people overlook or maybe just don't even know to ask. So that's how Sell My MSP came about. And then another time I was on Facebook, and a friend of mine, Chris Tim, he's out in the UK, and he and I were on the Autotask Facebook group, and we're both answering questions that people were asking about Autotask. So I reached out to Chris and I said, why aren't we doing something? So then we started the PSA Impact podcast, and we've been doing that for about 4 or 5 years now. And recently, and this is like breaking news that's being released on ChannelPro's podcast, that we have recently taken our podcast, PSA Impact, and we turned it into a corporation. And now Chris, Tim, and I are working as partners and providing PSA consulting services around the globe together. So that's Rayanne's story.
Wow, and some breaking news to go along with it. That's pretty cool. So how many episodes have you done of the PSA Impact podcast?
About 60. We've done about 60 episodes. And this past summer, we both got so busy, and we just were like, okay, I think we need to take a break and focus on some stuff, and get like new content together. Where do we want to take this podcast? So and that summer turned into the fall, and that fall turned into a new corporation and and other plans. So we are planning to come back to start recording our podcasts again, probably in the spring.
Very, very exciting. Very cool. I hope that venture goes well for you. I'm sure we'll include a link to that podcast in the show notes for this episode here and for number 252. So as we kind of get into the news, I'll point out that we put links to all of the stories and all of the stuff that we talk about in the show notes. You can find that if you're listening. Usually you can open up the description area on your phone and you'll find all the links in there, so you can kind of follow along, as we're going to kind of cover the high level of stuff, but you can get all the nitty gritty by reading along as we cover it. If you don't see that, you can go to ChannelProNetwork.com, find the show sheet for episode 252. They're easy to find, and we'll put all the links in there. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you hit the subscribe button and the bell and the like button and hit all those buttons. But also open up the description area there, and we'll put the links in there for you as well. So make it nice and easy for you. So Rich, we've already kind of started talking about news, because I guess Rayanne kicked us off with the first news story. So I guess we might as well move along to our first news story. And folks, we got a lot to talk about today. We're going to be talking about Intel. We're going to be talking about a blog post from the NCSC. We're going to be talking a story from WithSecure. We're going to talk about tech management pro tips, all kinds of cool stuff. So Rich, tell us what Intel's got in the news.
Yeah, well, Intel is sort of the big news story in the industry this week. It's certainly the big product news, because they have introduced their latest generation of data center processors. So this is their 4th gen Intel Xeon Scalable family. You may be familiar with it as codename Sapphire Rapids, which took a while to get out there, but it's out there now. Sapphire Rapids has shipped. So has the Intel CPU Max series, aka Sapphire Rapids HDM for high bandwidth memory, and the Intel Data Center GPU Max series, which was codenamed Ponte Vecchio. Now this gets a little confusing, but they are built on the Intel 7 process, which is not a 7 nanometer process. It's an enhanced 10 nanometer. Intel has a 7 nanometer process and family of chips coming supposedly later this year. It's called Intel 4. And so why, the 10 nanometer is Intel 7 and 7 nanometer is Intel 4, I don't know, but just to say that's how that works. they've provided a lot of statistics, a lot of information about the performance gains that you're going to get stepping up from 3rd gen to 4th gen. 53% average performance gain on general purpose compute, up to 10x on artificial intelligence inference and training, up to 2x performance on data compression, up to 3.7x on high performance computing. There are also some notable sustainability, power consumption improvements here. On average, you're saving 2.9x performance per watt on these products here. They come with a new thing called optimized power mode that will produce up to 20% per socket additional power savings at only the cost of a 5% performance hit. So if you can give up 5% of performance, you can actually lower your power spending and consumption by up to 20%. A bunch of new technologies in these processors that we have seen in processors from some other companies, but this is a first for Intel: DDR5 memory, PCIe 5, Compute Express Link. The differentiator, though, here, and this appears to be very core to the Intel data center processor strategy, is these chips come with a whole bunch of what Intel calls accelerators, and these are chips that are designed to accelerate specific workloads. So there's an accelerator for deep learning. There's one for storage. There's one for analytics. There's one for encryption and decryption. And the idea is you can, improve the scalability and the performance of your compute environment without having to add cores or CPUs, because these accelerators will make the core CPUs that you've got now work that much more effectively. So there are 8 of those in total. You can just get them bundled in with the chip when you order and pay for everything up front. There's actually an interesting new sort of pay-as-you-go service called Intel On Demand, in which all those accelerators are on the chips when you buy them, but you can kind of flip the switch and turn them on when you need them and pay more as you do so. And as you would expect, around a product launch like this, a lot of their hardware partners are, out of the gate, ready to go with 4th gen and other products built on these new Intel processors. Lenovo, ASUS, Cisco, Supermicro all have systems out there. So a big new milestone on the road to 7 nanometer in data center for Intel.
So is that like the official end of the chip shortage in the world? And it almost sounds like, chips subscriptions, right? Like, okay, I want this accelerator now. Okay, are we buying this monthly? Are we paying for it one time and then somebody flips a switch somewhere and then we have it for the rest of the computer's natural life? I'm confused how that works, but
yeah, I was going to ask the same thing. I've never. This is definitely something different,
right?
It is something different, that's for sure. And I'll tell you the truth. I don't know. I don't think it's a recurring revenue kind of model, but I'm not super familiar with Intel On Demand yet. So I would think it's more along the lines of a one-time payment. But I need to read up a little more on Intel On Demand to say for sure.
Yeah, and what if it's a dual socket? You have to pay twice if you have 2 processors in there. It's really interesting that they're kind of going that model. But I guess if you're going to invest heavily in data center, you can invest in potentially more performance if you don't know without having to pay for it if you don't know if you actually need it, but having it there, which is kind of cool.
It's almost brilliant if you think about it, right? Like, sell one chip, but the capacity to have 10 other chips inside that chip for future use, that would stop a chip shortage in the future. Like, if you need this but you can't get it because it's stuck on the other side of the world and no ships are coming across, well, you've already got it. Let's just activate it. I mean, I remember QuickBooks did that too. You could just, say, okay, I want advanced inventory. All right, click that button, pay $995, and you've got advanced inventory. So pretty brilliant if you ask me.
The other thing that's significant about it that I didn't mention is, I kind of alluded to the fact, if you look at AMD and maybe Amazon and their Gravitron, other hardware manufacturers have gotten out to market with things like DDR5 and PCIe 5 and so on ahead of Intel. The differentiating competitive strategy that I think Intel is pursuing, and that the accelerators in particular sort of make clear, is this idea of creating workload specific processors and processors that can do general purpose compute as well. But if you know that you are setting up an environment for analytics, for example, they're kind of hoping that we're going to be able to enable you to do that in a better way, because we've built something that's just for that workload, and encryption, decryption, AI, etc.
I wonder if crypto mining is included in that. Is there like a special chip for crypto mining?
Oh, God.
Well, that's usually GPU. That's the NVIDIA side, and the AMD and NVIDIA side of that equation is generally where you see a lot of the crypto optimization. And that's also one of the reasons why graphics cards are so darn expensive these days, is because they're all bought up for crypto mining. So, and for those who like numbers, there's a lot of interesting numbers here. I usually like to kind of follow the transistor count of processors, just because it's been a number that I've watched throughout the years just go up and up and up and up into crazy numbers. So this one, their data center GPU Max series packs over 100 billion transistors into a 47 tile package. That's a lot of transistors.
So how about this, Matt? Last week at CES, AMD announced their Instinct MI300 processor, which is similar functionally to some of these Intel processors. That one had 146 billion transistors.
Oh my gosh, it's crazy. They're just
Crazy
insane numbers, right? So that's I haven't caught up on all the press releases out of CES yet, but that's fascinating stuff. Well, really interesting. There's a lot of other numbers in here, folks. If you're interested in Intel's 4th gen Xeon data center processors, go find that link that I talked about earlier, and you can go read up there. And there's a whole bunch of other links in here to go and learn more. Next story, Rich. This one is from the National Cyber Security Center. It's using MSPs to administer your what?
Well, here's what, and this story and the next one, these aren't like big breaking news stories, but they're things I've come across this week that I thought we're bringing up on the show and chatting about a little bit. So just within the past few days, the sort of cybersecurity arm of the UK government published a notice, an advisory about working with MSPs, and CISA, the US government's cybersecurity entity, I immediately republished it and sort of endorsed it. And so that both these governments are kind of standing behind this. And the gist of it basically was this is an effort to make businesses aware of the security vulnerabilities that you can expose yourself to by working with an MSP. Now, they are absolutely not saying don't work with MSPs. In fact, this document that we're talking about here has a very good clean, simple definition of what an MSP is and the advantages of working with an MSP. But they said, you just have to be mindful of the fact that, as they put it in the document, a third party is a third attack surface for your business. And I'm quoting now here, using an MSP is a security trade-off. You will gain the security benefits that come with using the MSP's expertise. You usually almost always end up having to give the MSP administrative access to your data, though, and that increases attack surface. There are now more surface systems that, if attacked, would compromise your data. There's some information here, some recommendations about questions to ask an MSP, and issues to consider. Are the MSP's cloud privileges proportionate to what they've been tasked and contracted to do? Does the MSP publish evidence that they follow secure administration practices? The significance of this to me is that between the cyber insurance companies and now governments as well, we've got more and more bodies out there going straight to the business community and encouraging them for perfectly legitimate reasons to be really rigorous about what MSP they do or don't work with, and how diligent is that MSP about security, because they are potentially, if you hire the wrong MSP, they are potentially a liability to your business. And so I think, this is probably already a pretty big consideration, for people out there when they're talking to customers. But I think even if it isn't, more and more, be prepared to have this kind of a conversation with clients about security and how you handle it, and how you ensure that your vulnerabilities, to the extent they exist, aren't going to be passed along to them.
This is just more going towards, or I should say going down the path of having standards for MSPs, right? Customers are going to be informed about this stuff, and they're going to be looking for MSPs that meet criteria, and those criteria will be defined and will have to be certified in some way or met, because that's just the direction it's going, because security is that important. That's kind of how I read this. Rand, how do you read this?
So yeah, another area, another topic near and dear to my heart here is that, first of all, MSPs are being held to a standard that has not been defined. And, and MSPs are being held accountable for things like security breaches from their, or attacks or ransomware, attacks on their clients' computers. But the thing is that there is no defined standard, like you must follow these rules. And when I see something like this coming out from a government, and to Rich, to your point, they're not saying not to use an MSP, but they're saying, hey, get yourself informed and ask the right questions. And I can appreciate that. On the other hand, I feel like they have not consulted with the people in the trenches doing this work, and we should be working with the government in tandem to protect, not only the small businesses and the consumers, but the MSPs, who are often small businesses themselves. We should all be working together to do this and not point fingers at each other. You're not doing this right, you haven't done that. Well, we don't know what we're supposed to do, and I could go on for hours, and I'm very passionate about this topic. And that's why I'm on the board of directors at the National Society of IT Service Providers, because that's exactly what we're trying to do, is get a seat at the table and have the conversations with the lawmakers, so that we can come up with some legislation or standards that make sense, and that, something that people can follow. And hey, I've done these things, and we're learning new things every day, and we're training our team every week, and we're, doing all of the right things, so that we can be trusted.
Yeah, this is an advisory, a well-intentioned advisory that was written without, consultation with MSPs. If you imagine the same people, the same governments drafting laws, you can imagine all the things that could go wrong there. And so, yeah, this is why that the National Society of IT Service Providers is, which is a very young, it's scarcely more than a year old now, but that is core to the mission, to make sure, or to help the MSP community organize so that it can be a part of these conversations with governments, and any laws that do get written well. I'll make sure we include a link to the National Society homepage and the show notes for this episode.
Thank you.
Yeah, I also found it interesting. They pointed out that that the MSP's own IT system can be a target for attackers, and then therefore a vector to the customers, because that's kind of happened a few times. I guess. What do you think that including that was? I'm not sure how I want to ask this question. I just found it interesting that they included that. Did you find that interesting?
Which part?
Oh, they were talking about how
by adding a third party, you're adding the risk of having a third party have the keys to your kingdom, so to speak. That piece.
Yeah, and that the
But
MSP can be a target, but that target can then go to you, because that's kind of what happened with the whole Kaseya breach, right? Was that what that was about?
that's exactly what happened. Yeah, and I know a number of MSPs that, well, there was at least one that I know of whose client got breached, and they were a Department of Defense contractor, and the lawsuit that came out of it was enough to put that MSP squarely out of business, and so many others. You see the story after story, that somebody, some MSP's clients, through some RMM tool, were breached, and they spend the next 2 or 3 weeks scrambling, no sleep, working 24-hour days, trying to get these servers back online, restore from backup. So yeah, I'm with you, Matt. I found it interesting that they mentioned it, but I don't know that they solved it.
Right.
They didn't
Yeah.
offer a solution.
Yeah. Well, interesting. So we'll put a link to this article in the show notes. You can go through and read that, and there's a lot more in here as well as their 14 cloud security principles. So I guess they're giving some people's businesses something to kind of look for, and at least get them on the track to ask questions. Rich, what's the next story about? It's about AI generated texts. This is interesting.
And kind of timely, because ChatGPT has been all over the news for weeks and weeks. This does not directly concern ChatGPT exactly, but it does concern the engine that makes ChatGPT work, which is called GPT-3. That's the current latest generation of OpenAI's primary artificial intelligence engine. And as we know from reading about ChatGPT, with these large language models, you can ask for something, and this system will feed something back that in most cases is surprisingly good, hard to tell apart from what a human might produce. And so a company called WithSecure, this is a security vendor named WithSecure. They used to be called F-Secure Business, if that name is more familiar. They just got to thinking, could we use GPT-3? They did this experiment some months back before ChatGPT was available. So they were working just with GPT-3. Could we use GPT-3 potentially to draft a phishing email or a spear phishing email? And they experimented with a technique that's called prompt engineering, where you're sort of tweaking and refining and honing the prompts to get just what you need back. And they got to be pretty good at generating some really convincing phishing emails in GPT-3. And they kind of call attention to this as sort of a wake-up call, a warning to the world in terms of what we are potentially in for down the road here. If you think about the giveaways, somebody writing in English who's maybe not a native English speaker, and that's how you know that phishing email is a total fake, for example. Well, that you might not have that advantage anymore going forward once these folks start using AI generators to create those phishing emails. They may be able to create spear phishing, like really targeted emails, in a very, very effective, convincing kind of way. And it is an open question, a question mark, as to whether or not the security technologies that we're relying on to protect us from that kind of thing will spot that, will know that this was artificially generated or not, or if they are susceptible to being fooled as well. So this is not, like some big threat today or right now, but it is an interesting sign of the times, and we're all kind of thinking about what AI is going to mean, for people in my line of work, for writers and so on. Here's another dimension of AI to keep in mind. It in the wrong hands and without the proper protections from a company like OpenAI, it could be a cyber attack superweapon.
Ryan, I'll let you comment first.
I'm listening, and I'm trying to think of how this could even work. So what if you go to a website, and you need some customer support, and up comes this little chat box, right? Can I help you today? What are you looking for? And then you answer the question, and then it asks you a follow-up question, right? Does that personalized information, could that personalized information get then transformed into a phishing email where the recipient says, oh, I was at this website and I answered these questions, and so this must be real. Click. Right?
You are a criminal mastermind, Rayanne. I mean, that's exactly what somebody could do. Yeah, that would work beautifully.
That's frightening to think that that's even possible, right? Because and put your email address in here, or more times than not, a cookie could just be planted, and they'll grab that email address someplace else. So many things so many bad things that could be done with that. Just Matt.
Yeah, I'm just saying this. The future is a very, very scary place. Like with deep fakes, you can't be certain that what you see is real. With this kind of stuff, we're not going to be able to be certain what we read is real, or what the interaction that we're having with somebody that seems real, if that's real. We can't believe texts because they're going to seem real. We can't believe what we hear because that can be manipulated. How is anybody going to trust anything in 10 years? I just don't know if that's possible.
I certainly hope that, with all of the deep fakes, there's, somebody a lot smarter than me. Somebody has got to find a way to, I was talking with a friend, and we were talking about, all of the security measures that are going on, with computers. And, so if a bank kept getting robbed, would they put more locks on the doors, or would they, would they bring the criminal to justice? Well, we're going to get robbed no matter what. Just keep putting more locks on the doors, right? That's the way we protect ourselves. And I think that's kind of how the world is still looking at cybersecurity, that we keep talking about more and more locks, as opposed to how do we stop the people, how do we catch them, and how do we make them not do that anymore. So
that is a hard proposition. especially in the digital age,
Well, I don't know, we're always saying, oh, they're in some other country, they're in this faraway country, and this is going to sound very big brotherish, right? But, at some point, I think all of these international organizations and countries need to come together and say, this is a problem, and we're not going to be able to solve it individually. We have to solve it collectively. We have to, and we have to stop protecting people, and, just because they live in the same zip code or the same country that, that we're from. That's, what you're doing is wrong, and you're going to pay. Sorry, it's just.
Rich, last word.
Yeah, well, you know what? I'm not going to climb on my soapbox about that. I'll just kind of endorse what Rayanne is saying. I think back to something that Dave Sobel of MSP Radio said on this podcast once upon a time, which is that there's sort of a disservice done when we refer to cybercrime as opposed to what it really is, which is just crime. And if we were talking about a crime wave that was doing $1.5 trillion with a T dollars worth of damage globally, but wasn't cyber, the kind of initiative you're talking about, Rayanne, I think, what somebody would at least be trying to drive that. Because we understand, the urgency of the situation and the fact that it crosses borders with what what you could call traditional crime. I think governments kind of get that it probably makes sense for us to, to some extent, some governments to collaborate around this. And because cybercrime is cybercrime, ones and zeros and bits and bytes, it somehow doesn't feel as real, and so you're just not seeing that sense of urgency that you would if this was $1.5 trillion worth of bank robberies happening worldwide every year, and you know, we know who the gangs are responsible for them, but you know, there's a lot to be said there, and we don't have time to say it.
Well, it's an interesting article. We'll put that link to that one in the show notes as well. Go and check that out, and start thinking about what the future is going to be like, because it's going to be a wild ride. I think that's it for news this week, but there's one story from the site that I know we wanted to talk about, and that was called Tech Management Pro Tips. Everybody likes pro tips. Rich, tell us about this.
Yeah, and this is the story I was kind of hinting at early on in the show here. We're going to have a Tech Management Pro Tips session, different name, coming up at that January 18th online summit event of ours. But this is from our December issue, and it covers a topic that I know pretty much every MSP thinks about, has to think about, which is hiring and retaining and managing technicians, you know, and working with people who are maybe great with technology, but it's a very customer facing, customer service kind of role. Helping these people grow in their career, and you know, because according to the latest CompTIA report, the unemployment rate in IT across positions is 1.8%, which is very, very roughly half of what the overall unemployment rate is in the economy in the US right now. So we all know, very tight labor market. If you have good technicians, they're probably getting offers from other companies. And so managing them to serve your customers well, managing them so that you don't lose their skills to somebody else is an important topic. Some of the advice that comes up in the article is, you know, Ole Thordarson, who has quite recently been a guest host on the show, an MSP and security expert in Southern California, emphasizes the importance of respect, listening, and teamwork, making sure that people understand that they are valued, their opinions are valued, they are part of the team that is running and guiding the company, and they don't just kind of feel like they are disposable cogs in that machine. Lisa Shore, our good friend Lisa Shore, who's co-hosted with us many times, agreed, endorsed the same point. You know, you got to listen to the staff's ideas and concerns and show empathy with their needs and requests, and it's got to be sincere. That has to be sort of part of your culture. Ole had some interesting things to say, because compensation is kind of a big issue right now. And Ole was kind of talking about that, you know, there is a temptation to resist raising what you pay your techs, you know, because obviously it's going to increase your overhead significantly, but there's an enormous risk to not doing that. And the way he kind of handles it is when he's hiring somebody new at the going market rate, which is maybe more than his existing techs are making, he will go ahead and give the existing techs a raise to make sure that they're not, so that there's not a gap between the new guy and the existing guys, and there's no longer a gap between his technicians, what they're getting paid, and what technicians at other companies nearby are getting paid. And so it costs money, and some of that I'm sure gets passed along to the end user. But you know, he will make that investment to keep up with the market, to make sure he doesn't lose people who he values. And then there was a lot of stuff, and I've heard this outside of this article from MSPs too, you know, stuff that might kind of slip your mind in terms of providing positive feedback and sharing positive feedback with your techs. Because generally speaking, if you're working on the help desk, the only time you talk to a customer is when something has gone wrong and they're angry. And if the customer is happy about, you know, the resolution of that issue or the service they're getting in general, that message goes typically to the owner of the MSP. And so I know MSPs who will actually bring the techs together now and again and read, you know, the happy emails that they've gotten from satisfied customers, and will have meetings with their techs in which they say, you know, Rich, you did a great job on thus and such issue, and here's what you did, and everybody showing some appreciation actually can go a long way towards making people feel valued and wanting to stay around. And as somebody in the article points out, it doesn't cost you anything. This is free stuff. You know, career planning with people and showing them that you care about their career path and are willing to help work with them on that. Another thing doesn't really cost you much, and they're going to appreciate it a ton. So anyway, there's a lot that's said in the article, a lot we're going to be saying at the event next week, and it's an important topic right now.
I loved this article. I really did. And because I feel like everybody that I know, like every MSP that I know, my own company went through, you know, the struggles of hiring, and I used to, and I would laugh because every time I hired somebody new, everybody else got a raise. And, you know, I don't know if they put two and two together, you know, like, so every time I go to, I wonder now if they think, oh, good, she's hiring again, I'm going to get another raise. You know, because you know, I do want to pay people based on, you know, the current market rate, and it's not right for me to bring somebody new in who needs to be trained at a greater salary than somebody who has been with me for a year or two and has already put in that work, right? That person deserves to be, you know, senior to the new person. And, you know, and some of these ideas about, you know, we've done, we do the management feedback, so it's employee feedback, but we are also asking for their feedback of us. What are we doing well? What can we do better as your leader, as, you know, as the team lead, as, you know, the leader of the company? You know, where do you want to go? Where, you know, what areas do you want to work on? What do you want to learn? Blah, 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 right? We do all of that. Yeah, and, you know, we have team outings. That does cost money, but, you know, but you can't, it doesn't matter how much that costs, because the team building that happens, you know, like when you split up the last one we did was we did a scavenger hunt, and we split the company into two teams, and we had to go through the scavenger hunt. It was like really just goofy stuff, you know, that we did outside, and it was so much fun. Then we went and did some laser tag, you know, after lunch, and it was just like a day out to go and have a good time. So but you know, you really do have to invest your time and efforts in your team, because it pays off in dividends for a long, long time. So.
Very good. Well, we will put a link to this story in the show notes. Rich, anything else you want to follow up on this? It was a really good article. It's got a lot of good stuff in it.
You know, there's a whole other really interesting issue that we didn't get into all that deeply in this article, but we'll definitely be talking about it at the event next week, around hybrid work. Because at least one of the panelists in that session I'm doing, you know, insists that his techs all work at the office. So, you know, if you got a sick child or something like that, you can work home for a day or whatever. But he likes to have all his techs in the office working together, sharing information, collaborating, building, maintaining that culture. And that's all really good stuff. But there are a lot of techs out there who prefer either a remote work or a hybrid work environment. And with, you know, 1.8% unemployment in tech, so it's an interesting kind of trade-off, and we'll be talking about that at the online summit event next week.
Yeah, that will be interesting. Yeah, everyone's gonna have to.
I'm definitely gonna have to tune into that, because that's a great topic. It really is. So, and I was one of those people like, no, you have to be in the office. You know, we're a team, and I now have 3 full-time remote staff, and not every one of them says that they still feel like they are part of the team. You know, like we're on teams, you know, we communicate all the time, and, you know, they don't feel like they are way out there, you know, and not part of the team as a whole. I just wish that they lived closer so that they could join the team building events, because they're just so much fun. So
yeah, very cool. Well, that wraps up the top part of the show here. Very interesting stuff. And we are going to move on to part 2 because we got a really great interview coming up. So we're going to take a short break. When we come back, we're going to be joined by Rory Sanchez. He had a business that he sold last year, and we're going to be kind of talking about that and some of the lessons learned. It's going to be a fascinating interview. I suspect largely dominated by Rayanne, which is the way it should be, because that's kind of her area of expertise. So this
I can't wait to chat with them. So
yeah, this
I've
is going
got
to be
a ton of questions already.
awesome. So folks, stick around for that. We will be right back. And welcome back to part 2 of this episode of ChannelPro Weekly. We got a great interview, probably be a fascinating interview lined up for you today. Last year, Cerebus Sentinel acquired MSSP True Digital Security, which was an MSSP focused on cybersecurity operations and compliance. Well, joining us today is Rory Sanchez, the former CEO of True Digital Security, who's here to share some lessons learned selling his business for those who may be looking to sell or be acquired someday. Welcome, Rory.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
It's good to see you. I should also point out that you have also been a guest host on the show before, so some of our listeners and viewers may be familiar with that friendly face of yours.
Yeah, thanks for having me back. Good to see everybody. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you. For those who may have missed a previous episode that you were on, why don't you take a few minutes to tell us a little bit more about you and a little bit more about, and we're going to get into the acquisition and some of the lessons learned there, but tell us about what True Digital Security was.
Sure. So, True Digital Security was a company kind of based in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and we really focused around IT security and compliance. Really, IT security, I mean, we did everything ourselves. We did very little outsourcing, so we ran our own 24/7 security operations center. We had a security services team. We did kind of the entire gamut. I had grown up kind of in the MSP circles, and it's interesting because we were always looking for someone who knew kind of more about security than we did, or really saw it through the security lens and not just through the IT lens. And I think it was back around 2015, met these guys from Oklahoma, and I remember going back and getting my director of operations and going, "Hey man, you got to come out to Tulsa with me," because I met some guys who are really pure play security guys, right? They totally see computer security and compliance, through the right lens. And I remember my partner Jerry there, who he hates it when people call him Dr. anything, but he's got a PhD in something. So sometimes we make fun of him by calling him Dr. Dawkins. And Jerry, Jerry really saw, security through the proper lens. The company never sold any products. The first time we were looking at doing some things, that customer needed some things, I mentioned Tech Data, Ingram Micro. They had no idea who those people were. They're like, "We've never sold a single thing, right? We're pure play security testing and validation." And he said, "What do you do again?" And I said, "We're an IT company." And he said, "Oh, I hate IT guys." And we became really good friends right after that. Right? I think my response was, "I bet the reason you hate IT guys is kind of the same reason I'm looking to partner up with a security company," right? And that is that the best way to put it is we see the same things through a different lens, right? IT is always judged by everything working, right? You take the basic scenario, you've got Betty, the receptionist, things aren't working. The IT guy shows up, he does some magic, he walks away, and suddenly Betty's happy, right? It's like, we love the IT guy. And then the security guys come in and they start breaking things in the eyes of the end user, right? It's like, oh, the security guys came in, I've got more hurdles to jump, right? Now I've got to do some kind of a two-factor thing. It's texting me, I need an app. I used to be able to print to that printer over there from anywhere in the office. Now I can only print to that printer over there at certain times from certain places. The security guys were like, "Hey, you know why you can't print to that printer as easily as you used to? Because the previous guy said the easiest way for this thing to work is we give the printer admin rights. Now the printer it's got admin rights. But the bad guys know if they hack into your printer, now they have admin rights, right? So we got to lock things down. And until people, until security becomes an enabler of business as opposed to, a roadblock, then, the end user always perceived, well, the IT guys make things work, the security guys make it more difficult for me. So that was always our goal at True, was how do we make security a business enabler and a different differentiator without affecting productivity.
Yeah, the security folks always seem to make things more inconvenient because security
Exactly.
is inconvenience.
Exactly. And to me, that always came from security being an afterthought, right? That's what we found so often was, people said, we need all this stuff to work. And then it was like, oh, now we need to secure it. And we thought, well, if we could have built it to be secure in the first place, we could have made it so that maybe some of those speed bumps weren't there, and it wasn't. We see this. I'm in Florida, and we see this now on the Florida Turnpike, right? They're getting rid of all the toll booths. Now, right, toll booths, it was another slowdown, right? It was an inconvenience. And now they've got it to where, you get on and off the highway and the system is figuring out what exit did you get on, what exit did you get off. They bill you. It's not an inconvenience anymore, right? And that's the thing, right? Ultimately, the goal is to make IT security work similar to that, right? We're governing what's going on without, impeding how the end user does their work.
Well, I'd still say the bill is an inconvenience for that toll.
The what? Yeah.
I'd still say.
See, the great thing is now, and we're getting completely off topic as we often do, but when like cryptocurrency and digital money and all this, people are like, well, how's that going to work? Like, I don't get it. Like, I can hold a dollar in my hand, but what if I don't? And I'm like, you're already doing that now, right? Like people get paid, you get direct deposit, and you didn't see that money. And then your bills are automated, right? It hits your credit card. The credit card's on auto pay. I had somebody tell me one time, like, I think I could die, and for 3 years, all my bills will continue to get paid because even when I run out of money, I've got overdraft protection. The bank will loan me some money to come, So, and I'm like, and none of this money, people are paying with credit cards, you're paying electronic. I'm like, it's already electronic, it's already digital money. The oddity is the guy who has a dollar in her hand. So yes, and seeing the bill, and now they don't mail you bills to your house. So now you don't even have to see the bill, right? Just occasionally you just wonder, I hope I have a positive balance. And the fact that, they didn't come knock at your door and, or you were able to leave Starbucks with your coffee, things are like, I guess everything is okay.
I was literally having a conversation with a client / friend the other day, and we were talking about the proverbial $10,000 in cash under the mattress, right? So, we come from that era where, if you don't have at least $3,000 or $4,000 in cash, like what's going to happen when the world blows up? You're going to have no money. And now all of a sudden, we find ourselves with these piles of $100 bills and nobody wants to take them. So what do we do with this money, right? That's stuck under the mattress and, soon enough we'll have no value at all.
Right. And everybody keeps toilet paper under the mattress just in case of a pandemic.
Right.
Rory, in terms of the sale of True Digital Security, that one of the things I'm always curious about in these stories is the origin point. Like, how were you kind of looking actively, potentially, for an acquirer? Did an offer come out of the blue?
It was a little bit. We weren't really looking to sell the business. In fact, we were approached by a couple of organizations. We'd actually had some meetings with some PE folks that were interested in in a larger play. You know, we were about a $15 million a year business, and they were looking for like, you know, a $30 million. So we were actually talking to another organization that was around a $15 million organization about, hey, what if we were able to get together and make an attractive deal for you? We had put together a really great team. We were delivering services with just a stellar group of people, and we were looking for a way to accelerate. So as we were approached, it was very interesting. There was some software that we were working on, a thing that we called True Speed. Speed, the SPD, stood for Security Program Development, which was sort of started out as a GRC platform, and something that we were using to kind of gauge the maturity level of our clients' security program and kind of visualize where they were and where they were heading. And it was really interesting. We had some organizations approach us and say, "Hey, that's what we want to invest in," right? It was more like VC guys, right? We want to take something that's in its infancy. We want to invest in that. You should sell off the services business, and we want to invest in this. And then there were more like PE guys who were like, "Why are you building anything? Any software you need, you buy it. If it doesn't exist, tell some people, they'll build it. You know, get rid of any software development that you're doing. Let's just focus on the services, because that's where you can really generate a lot of money." And we were like, well, you know, we're trying to build something. So you know, we were very out in the open that if you came to us and you're looking for the, you know, the magical EBITDA number, throwing lots of money to the bottom line, I always said, hey, you know, give me 6 months or a year, and we could probably make EBITDA whatever you'd like it to be. But we were looking for someone who got what we were doing, right? We were trying to build a security practice. We're trying to build the things that we need to drive value to it. And we had been investing in ourselves and not necessarily throwing as much money to the bottom line as we could. And that was sort of like the yin and the yang between when we talked to different kind of investment types. And when we met the people from CISO, I call them CISOs, they're a publicly traded company, and they have the ticker symbol CISO, CISO, which is a big, you know, win for them. That's a great ticker symbol. You know, they were in a similar place, right? They were trying to build a security company and found that we had a lot of operational maturity in what we were doing. So they were looking to grow a security practice, and we were looking to accelerate whatever we were already doing. And we started talking. We were probably talking for, you know, a long time. And before we, you know, started taking a look under the kimono per se, and eventually decided to do a deal.
If you don't mind, I would love to jump in, because I have just listening to your story. I have a number of questions.
Sure.
First thing, early on in the conversation, you were saying that that you had a great team, you know, and you put together this, you know, this whole plan, and you wanted to accelerate your growth. So let's talk about the preparation work that was involved in getting your company in a position for acquisition. Like, how much work or how much time and effort did you spend to focus on, you know, did you document your processes? Did you, what sort of planning and preparation work did the company go through, and how long did that take?
Well, because you're telling me connection unstable again. Hopefully we're gonna keep going here. What do you call it? Because we weren't really planning for a sale, I would say we didn't put that much time and effort into sort of preparing. But one thing was, we were SOC 2. You know, we helped other companies prepare for SOC 2, and that was one of the things when we first got the IT company and the security company together, and then built our MSP practice, there were certain organizations that we worked with that required things like SOC 2 to be in place. So we did SOC 2 annually, and for that reason, we had a lot of documentation on how our processes worked. The operational side of the business was very, 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 very clean, very, very tight.
So interestingly enough, like one of the things that companies look for when they are acquiring another company is something that's called synergies, that you have something that they don't, and they could not get it by just buying one of your competitors, because you had something very, very unique that you could offer them. And out of curiosity, and I'm not asking for any specific numbers, but did that SOC 2 certified designation help with any multiples of value? Did that help increase the value of your company?
I don't know if say the SOC 2 certification itself could, if I could point to that and go, well, this definitely helped. But I think the fact that our security operations center and network operations center was all under SOC 2, I believe. And if you know how SOC 2 works, you can pick which pieces of your organization are SOC 2 audited, and that goes all into the audit documentation, right? So it's funny because I've heard people say, well, I can make anybody pass SOC 2 by just whittling down how much of their organization gets SOC 2 audited. But we were, I know our network operations center and the way that we ran the MSP practice in the business was SOC 2, and then we were moving in that direction in our security operations center. But I think something that was important was the fact that we didn't really outsource any of that, right? It was our 24/7 SOC. We had a physical location. We had clients that were NERC-CIP, which is regulatory compliance around energy. So having had clients in Oklahoma and Texas, there's a lot of energy companies there that we did business with, and because of that, there were certain requirements that we met. And even during the pandemic, when people were not allowed to gather anywhere in particular, those regulations were actually softened a bit, which allowed some people to work from home. But it was really one of the first areas where it started tightening up again. So as soon as people felt comfortable all going to the same place again, that's what we started to do. But I think the minimal reliance on third parties and the fact that we had built a lot of what our service delivery was internal. Obviously, we were using external tools, right? But the personnel was all in-house. We kind of did everything ourselves.
Okay, so I'm going to switch gears, and by the way, Rich, Matt, sorry if I'm just like monopolizing this conversation. As you were talking,
nobody wants to hear from those guys. We want to.
So you were saying that the courtship with this company took a long time before you even started talking about the acquisition. How long was that courtship? And then from when, from that point where you're like, okay, maybe we can do business together. From that point, what was the timeline from letter of intent to closing to transition?
I'm going to say that we sold the company at the beginning of 2022. So I'm going to say we started talking to them sometime in early 2021. It was introduction. The CEO of the company had a personal relationship with someone who knew one of my partners at True, and facilitated a conversation. I think the gentleman said, "Man, it's funny. There's a guy coincidentally named Matt who he was sort of known for not making introductions because he didn't want to be responsible for putting a couple people together and it didn't work out. And he actually put our companies together. He said he had apparently been talking to the CEO of CISO, and he was talking to my partner Jerry, and he called Jerry and was like, "Hey, you should meet this guy because talking to him and talking to you, it sounds like you're both trying to build the same company." And maybe there's some synergies there where you guys could do it together. And I think that's what started the conversation. Um, but but there were a number of things that we were right in the middle of some things. We really weren't looking for an acquisition, and we started. We liked the people, and then that's always important. I'm a big guy around culture. I've been involved in some smaller M&A deals in the past, and always found that you can look at financials and you can see the levels of the engineers, and there's other ways of gauging operational maturity. But what I think ends up being really, really important is that the cultures mesh. Um, that's always a big uh, hurdle when it turns out that the people don't get along, or they don't like the way the other teams function, right? That creates probably more headbutting than just about anything else, right? The other things, the financials, that's almost like a business thing. And the skill sets, that's you can train people up or you can hire, but it seems like when the cultures are different, that's I'm going to say that's the number one thing that creates a breakdown.
And that's usually one of the very first questions when I'm working with a buyer or a seller. Do you like these people? I mean, do you like them like enough to marry them? Because that's what we're talking about here, is a marriage. And some marriages work and some marriages don't, and I have this rule in life. I call it the 6-month crazy rule, right? Because everybody's on their best behavior in the early parts of a relationship, and crazy doesn't really start to show itself until after about 6 months. It's just been a lifelong rule of mine. But you liked the company, and they had similar values as yours, your company values, your visions. I'm assuming you had lengthy conversations with them about where you were taking your company, where they wanted to take their company, and they were aligned?
That's correct. Yeah. It seems like, definitely at the time, I think we had a lot more what I would call operational maturity, and they had plans for leveraging the public markets and being able to raise some funds and kind of take us to the next level. So I think the conversation started there. We actually did some business together. They were trying to grow nationally, did some business in our backyard that we assisted with. So we really kind of got to know each other before we started talking about, what a deal would look like.
Looking back now, is there anything that you would have changed about that process? If you
Yeah.
knew then what you know now, is there anything that you would have done differently?
Probably. I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to be able to put my finger on that right now, but I think yes, right. But in talking about the things that you want to look into as you're moving forward on this kind of a deal, or even evaluating a deal, and going back to the culture thing, there's there's a few organizations from the past. I once was involved in acquiring a small IT slash kind of MSP company, um, and they looked great, right? Like we liked the people, and there were some things that we learned as we got together, which were not the obvious things. Um, there was some there were some accounting errors that I don't think were done on purpose. It was just um, the whoever was doing the bookkeeping just wasn't as savvy as they could have been, and in categorizing things properly, and deciding, well, what is really a capital expense and what's not, and those kind of things. But yeah, we found there were people who were working very hard, but not really working smart. Um, and some of it was training, but there's just a lot of soft factors like that that are difficult to gauge, right? As you're evaluating a company. There was a company that we got together with once upon a time, and it was sort of a planned. Um, we created a holding company, and we were putting a couple of companies together. Um, and we ended up backing out of the entire deal, even after we had already announced that we were putting it together. And it's really funny. For the record, uh, I really liked the guy, right? Like the main guy, but other people didn't. And more than once he came to me, and he was like, Rory, am I a jerk? And by the way, jerk is the nice word. There's a more popular word, starts with an A, but we'll use jerk. Just like if I talk about not having a no jerk policy, everybody will know what I actually mean. But he come to me and says, Rory, am I a jerk? And I'm like, no, why? And he's like, I don't know. People think I'm a jerk. And if he did jerky things, I'd point it out. I'd be like, hey, this is the kind of thing that, like, triggers people and make them go like why does he say stuff like that? But that was one of the things that it was purely like a cultural thing that we ended up backing out the transaction and went our separate ways. And I don't think we've ever spoken again. But in case he watches the show, like, and he's talking about me. Like, I like the guy. I'd like to remain friends, but that was a long, long time ago. And I find it's always those sort of intangibles that kind of break things down.
That's so true. Like, you might have I'll call it a high jerk tolerance, right? And so that you can say, oh, well, that's just that person being that person, and and you can let things roll off your shoulders, but not everybody can do that. So are you saying that you walked away from that deal because members of your team were uncomfortable with the company you were bringing on? Was that just one of a number of mitigating factors, or was that the primary?
I think that was a big part of it. At the same time, he had been running a smaller organization, and he loved the idea that he was the boss, right? And he'd come in on a Monday morning, and he had an idea that he got over the weekend, and he was like, this is the direction of the company, right? Next thing you know, everybody's moving in that direction. And as he joined up with us and we were a larger organization, I remember one time he said, he was like, I don't like coming to the office. Nobody here knows that I'm one of the partners. I'm one of the owners. And I was like, nobody here cares about that. Like we have a hierarchy that we work in, and everybody's convinced, everybody wants to know, like, well, who's my boss? Who do I report to? And we run things that way, right? If we're going to have an ownership meeting, that's going to happen separate from our day-to-day jobs. And I think he kind of missed being the top guy who came in with a crazy idea on a Monday morning, and everybody followed him because that was the new direction starting today for at least the next week or so, or whatever it was. And I think ultimately he's a great person to to run his business his way. So, but these are things that you didn't really see as you looked at financials and got, well, what do you bring to the table? What do we bring to the table? Are we filling some gaps? Or are we becoming a larger partner with this vendor or whatever it was? Um, you know, the soft stuff, the intangibles, I think always are the difficult to gauge and sometimes have a really big impact.
All right, so if and again, I'm still monopolizing this conversation. Well, actually, you and I are, but anyway, moving on to the.
But look at the two of them. They're like, this is great. We're not having to do anything.
We're getting paid for this.
So moving on to the sale of your company, how did your team react when that was announced? Did you let them know that it was happening throughout the entire process, or did they all come in one day and receive a notification that, oh, by the way, we've been acquired?
Yeah, so that's interesting, right? The first thing I'll say about that is employees in general, no matter whether you call them an employee or a partner or a team or no matter what you say, anytime I found over the years, anytime there's any talk of we're acquiring someone else or we're being acquired, it seems like inevitably the first thing that hits everybody's brain is I'm getting fired, right? Either we're being acquired or I'm probably going to get fired. And then I thought, well, that doesn't happen when you announce you're acquiring someone else. Yes, it does, right? You acquire another company because maybe they've got a geographical presence somewhere where you want to be, or maybe some additional services. But everybody goes and says, "Oh, that company's got a whole bunch of people who seem to do the same things that I do. We're probably just going to start outsourcing to them, and I'm gone." For some reason, everybody always thinks they're gone. That's like the first reaction, right?
Right.
So how you let that out of the bag, I think, is somewhat important. Particularly like in our case, we were being told, "Hey, everyone from your team stays. We need everybody." Right? So we were real careful to communicate that. At the same time, we were being acquired by a company that had to do public reporting. So there's a certain amount of when you can say things and when you can't. But obviously, we had to get some of the leadership team involved. So I think that was the key, right? We brought in my company, we had about, I think it was 11 shareholders. So our board kind of got together and decided on some of the go forward. Once the board had made a decision to go forward, we had to have a shareholders meeting. And then once we had decided to kind of move forward with that was the time to get together with the leadership team, let some of the leadership team know what was going on and the fact that, we had to keep it under wraps, but we wanted to be able to have a very good message to communicate to each of the teams so people felt good about it, right? And I think it's important to be able to tell that story. That's something that I find a lot of companies don't do well is explain why we're acquiring someone or maybe why we're being acquired. And that's the part that I think makes everybody shaky is the not knowing why. I have examples of somebody acquired somebody. I was talking to a buddy of mine who's in sales, And he's like, yeah, so my company just acquired this other company. We found out about it when we saw the press release on LinkedIn. And then there's been no, there's been a day or two. There's been no internal communication as to why did we acquire this other company. He's like, as a sales guy, I want to know, do I have more things to sell? Do I have, do they have clients that are interested in acquiring some of what I sell? Do they have some products that maybe my clients are interested in? Is it, what's my story? Because I saw it on LinkedIn. My clients saw it on LinkedIn. They're going to be asking me questions. And I still don't know. Right. So I think, having a lot of that prep work, is important, right? You're not just, you're marketing to your clients, but you're also, your PR and marketing team has to consider, external, internal. It's holistic.
So, all right. So I know that we're probably low on time, and I really, really want to ask this last question. And when everything was said and done, and the sale went through, and you began the transition, was everything that was promised to you brought to fruition in the aftermath? Was there, how did the transition go smoothly? Was that well planned? Were your people promised things that the new management did not deliver on? How did it all end up?
I'm going to say that every one of these kind of deals that I've ever seen, maybe expectations are never really met as expected. I think in our case, there was definitely some things that didn't go as expected. But in the early stages, yes, there was I think we could have done a lot more for prep work. And that's a tricky thing too. Again, because they had public reporting requirements, there's a certain amount of time that certain things have to be done in. And at the same time, we couldn't really do a lot of disclosing ahead of time. But I think probably a lot more work could be done in analyzing the systems and understanding how we were going to get data from one to the other. From past experience, I've seen both, right? Where hey, we're acquiring you, or we're merging, or whatever we're doing. And the question always comes, well, we're letting clients know on day one, but what are the clients going to see different, right? And there's always a push to, well, let's get everything on the same accounting system. And then you find there's some very disparate systems, and people are categorizing things different ways. And
dear to my heart, as you might imagine.
Sure. Right. I mean, my suggestion is, if you can't do a lot of the prep work, just keep doing what you're doing, provide consolidated statements for a while, and put the plan together. And maybe at the end of a particular quarter, or maybe at the end of the first year, you pull the trigger, and starting next year it's clean, and you don't need a consolidated statement anymore. But I think trying to combine a lot of those things very quickly gets, kind of makes people crazy, right? You've got our deal happened in January. So we had our accounting team. Normally, as we enter January, they're thinking, oh, I got to close out the year. So in January 2022, they're all planning to close out 2021. And it was like, oh yeah, we're going to close out 2021. And by the way, we want to get you migrated onto our system as soon as possible. Oh, by the way, we've got some audit requirements. We need to train people, and the people from our accounting team. I don't know if anybody from the accounting team is still there. From the original accounting team, and it was a lot of craziness up front, and trying to get data back and forth and that sort of thing, and knowing who was responsible for making certain decisions on certain things, and I sort of dropped out of that loop, right? My VP of finance used to come to me very often about categorization and how we wanted to see certain things. And then suddenly, we were acquired by a company who had a CFO, and the CFO was making those decisions. And, and I think she was being pulled in a number of directions. So there was a lot of chaos there in the early days to kind of make that happen.
Well, fascinating stuff. This has been a great interview. Ran just awesome questions. Really, really good. I feel like we're only scratching the surface of this story. We need to do like a part 2, but unfortunately we're out of time for this episode, but maybe we'll have to have Rory and Rand back on to kind of continue this, because it's really interesting.
Rich, I don't know. Who's this Matt guy? Rich said Rand and I could talk as long as we wanted. Isn't that in my contract? Oh no, that's right. You guys are the guys getting paid.
We do have we're flexible. We do have time limits, unfortunately, but it was awesome stuff. Rory, thanks so much for coming on and talking on this topic a little bit and sharing some of that with us. For those who may want to follow up with you, have questions for you, or might want to work with you, where can they go? How can they connect with you?
How do they connect with me?
Mm-hmm.
You can send me an email, Rory at cubantime.com.
Sounds good.
That's the best way to get a hold of me. That's actually a joke that Cubans always run a little bit late. I actually had people miss my wedding because they were on Cuban time. So when I bought a boat, I named it Cuban Time, and then that way I could be on Cuban time all the time.
That sounds like a good plan. And,
so Rory, RRY at cubantime.com comes to me, and if for any reason anybody wants to spam me, that's the place to go.
That's the place to do it. Well, thank you so much.
Great to see you guys. Thanks for I don't know if I answered all the questions thoroughly, but I appreciate you guys reaching out, and happy to jump on anytime.
Oh yeah, we'll definitely have you back, and probably on this topic, because I'm sure there's a lot more to dive into and more lessons to be learned. So folks will have to just stick around for that and watch for the next time that you are on. But with that, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, Rand will be with us on the other side. We're going to break down the show and maybe have a little fun, depending on how much time we have left. So we will see about that. But you have to stay tuned to find out. We'll be right back. And we are now back with part 3 of this episode of ChannelPro Weekly. We're going to kind of break down the show and have a little bit of fun. But I want to say that was a really great interview with Rory. I really do want a part 2 to that episode, because I know that there's, based on some conversations we had off air, that there's a lot more to talk about, and we might have to follow up with that down the road. But Rand, did anything from that interview that's kind of stood out for you?
I had not met him before this conversation, and it just flowed so easily, right? The topics just went from one to another. I have to say, I love the artwork on his wall. It's like did you see the Guns N' Roses, picture at the bottom? And then there was that Bob Marley one, behind him. Anyway, I thought the artwork on his wall was fabulous. I couldn't stop looking at it.
Rich, anything you want to highlight?
Just at one point in the interview, I was kind of chuckling to myself, because this happened on the podcast once, I believe, when he was a guest host, and something he said kind of reminded me of it. And he was talking about acronyms and security, and he was talking about how he had found himself talking to a client who is not technical at all and saying that our SOC is SOC 2. Imagine what that would mean or not mean at all to an end user out there. Our SOC is SOC 2.
So it's not just one sock, it's 2 socks.
Yeah, exactly. Oh yeah, okay.
I wear 2 socks. I love that.
Very good. What was that? Was really good, and we will look forward to having him back again someday to talk about the rest of that story. With that, we have a little bit of time left to play a quick game. We've been Rand's been on before several times. We played 5 questions, and we did a round of 5 questions. Was it last week or the week before? I can't remember.
It was last week.
Was it last week? So we will. We're going to return to verses because in our little off the air conversation, we've discovered that Rayanne has consumed a fair bit of fair food. In fact, so we will pit the classic or not so classic fair foods and see if we can find Rayanne's favorites. Rayanne, does that sound like it'll be fun?
Let's do it.
All right, Rich, fair food. Why don't you kick us off?
Okay, round 1. Let's start with some classics and venture out from there. Cotton candy versus funnel cakes.
Oh, funnel cake all the way. Yeah, right. With the powdered sugar and throw some cherries on top, maybe just a little bit of whipped cream, but yeah, definitely funnel cake.
Yeah, funnel cake's going to be a tough one to beat because those are very nothing that we're going to talk about is probably very healthy because usually when you talk about fairs, you're talking about fried in a lot of cases. But let's see. We'll do funnel cake versus I got a good one. Funnel cake versus kettle corn.
Ooh, kettle corn. So I'm definitely a salty snack kind of gal, right? So I think that I'll take a few bites of that funnel cake, but then I'm eating a whole bag of kettle corn. Yeah.
All right. So it looks like kettle corn over funnel cake for Miss Rayanne. Rich?
I expected funnel cake to go deeper into the competition, but okay. So we've got kettle corn. So how about kettle corn versus corn dog?
I do like a good corn dog from time to time. I mean, it's like, cornbread and the hot dog and, all sorts of yumminess, right? I'm probably going to stick with the kettle corn, fewer calories. And, because I do really love me some kettle corn. But I want to give the corn dog props because it's definitely a close second.
Definitely a close second. All right, let's see if we can top kettle corn. I know at the fair that they have here, one of the more popular items is the stand that has like ears of corn that they make, and I guess they like dip them in butter or something like that. So we will go with kettle corn versus fair ears of corn.
So we're talking about popped corn versus corn.
Corn before it has been popped.
Corn before it was popped. Now so that's like apples to apples, kind of, right? I believe that the ears of corn are going to have far more flavor than anything that comes out of that kettle. So I'm going with the corn.
Ooh, good old ear of corn, Rich. We'll take a couple more guesses each, and we'll see if we can top ear of corn.
Okay, this might be a strategic mistake on my part, but I'm going to go back to sweet and see what happens here. So, ear of corn versus candy apple.
As a kid, I used to eat candy apples by like the dozen. My mother could not keep them in the house. We would, I was up in the Philadelphia area, and so we would go to Linvilla Orchards. It was an orchard, out in Brookhaven. Anyway, we would go there every fall by the, the pies and things in the fall. And, and I could not leave without a candy apple, right? That hard red candy on, surrounding the apple. And sometimes I would go with the caramel, but the candy apple, no, I think you hit the home run there. that almost nothing. And if you know anything about me, I am a fruit junkie. I cannot go a day without fruit of some sort. So candy apple.
Candy apple. All right. Well, Rich, we'll take one more turn to try and see if we can top it.
Good
So
luck with that.
I don't know if I'm going to be able to top it with anything else sweet. So I'm gonna throw a curveball, because I know when I've been to a fair before, I see people walking around with those giant turkey legs. And if you're like a meat lover, like those are probably really good. So I'm gonna go candy apple, fruit. Let's go versus carnivorous, the giant turkey leg.
I love me a giant turkey leg. There's, like that's the whole reason to go to the Renaissance Festival, right? So because it's at least acceptable that you walk around with the giant turkey leg at the Ren Fest. And at Thanksgiving, that's me. I'm the one walking around with I will literally cut off the hand of anybody who tries to take that drumstick from at Thanksgiving. But for fair food, like your typical fair food, I'm sticking with the candy apple. As messy as that is, trying to eat a candy apple at a fair, like you really need like wet naps and wipies, to recover from that at the end. But I love me some candy apple.
All right, Rich, I could not dethrone the candy apple. It's up to you. Can you find something better? Last chance.
Well, this is a Hail Mary out here. But when I think about, fair food or carnival food, like for me, that, I tend not to eat lots of deep fried foods, but that rule goes out the door when you're at a carnival. And so I want to go with something deep fried, but I'm not quite sure which way to go. But here's what I'll do. I'll just say candy apple versus deep fried Twinkie.
Ooh. Have you ever had a deep fried Twinkie? Because they are pretty fabulous. They really are. And they also deep fry Oreos. Like you can deep fry anything here. We're in Florida, so we'll fry anything. But candy apple or the Twinkie. Again, fruit junkie. I'm sticking with the apple.
And candy apple reigns supreme for Miss Rayanne Buccianico at the fair. That is her food of choice. Is there anything that would have topped it?
I don't know. Possible pizza in a cup.
I don't know if I've ever had pizza in a cup.
Me neither.
Have you ever seen the movie The Jerk? Steve Martin, so he meets, he meets his girlfriend and he says that this is the best pizza in a cup. People come from all over the country for this pizza in a cup. It's a slice of pizza that's cut up and stuck in a cup and served to you with a fork. Pizza in a cup.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Well, that's fun. So before we say goodbye, Rich, why don't you tell us what we might have missed and what might be coming in the week ahead?
Yeah, well, if you want to know what you might have missed, a great thing to do is go to our In Case You Missed It post, which appears every other Friday on ChannelProNetwork.com. Written by our own James Gaskin. He's going to have some of that partner news I alluded to before in connection with the Intel launch. There's a new threat intelligence and investigation product from Vade. CMIT, the managed services franchise organization, has a new, bigger private equity owner. And I'm sure he's going to have something unusual and funny in the news. We have not sort of touched base on what that will be, but I look forward to see what he comes up with. And then next week, in addition, of course, to our Managed Services and Cloud online summit, Wildix, the unified communications company, is doing its annual partner summit event. That's a virtual event this year. Chris Weiser is doing his latest 7-figure MSP live conference in Phoenix. So lots going on the event front is starting to heat up a little bit.
Well, awesome stuff. And where can you go to keep on top of all that stuff that's coming up down the road? Go to channelpronetwork.com, set it as your homepage, go there each and every day, bookmark it. And of course, make sure that you're reading all the articles there and the white papers and the resources and the downloads, because there's all kinds of stuff there that'll help you keep on top of what's going on in the industry, or help you with your business in some way, shape, or form, help you with hiring, we got all kinds of great content. So go and check that out. And of course, subscribe to Channel Pro Weekly everywhere it's at. We're on Apple Podcasts, we're on We're on Stitcher, we're on Spotify, we're on all the different podcast places. So make sure you go and subscribe there, leave a rating, leave a good comment. It's always helpful. If you like to watch on YouTube, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell, hit the like button, leave a comment there too. And that way it always goes to help. You can keep track of us there. Big thanks to our guest, returning guest host, Rayanne Buccianico from ABC Solutions, joining us this week. Thank you so much for coming on. I hope you had a good time.
I did. I always have a great time. So thank you so much for inviting me.
You are welcome, and it will not be the last time, of course. So, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in Dallas here in a few weeks. And and if you can, pop by our virtual event that we're having on the 18th. So with that, we're going to say that's the end of episode 252. We will see everyone in 253 next week. See you then.